Well, hello. This is Matt Kennedy. Welcome to the Pop Sequentialism channel. Um, I guess this is something I tend to only do quarterly these days, post a video. I only do so when I have something to say. I'm obviously not too concerned with the algorithm or subscribers or popping a lot of content up. That said, if you do like what you see and what you hear, then by all means, please like, comment, subscribe, all the things. But this is a subject that's come up a lot lately, and mostly I think because we've just seen another class graduate. It's June, so some people graduating back in May, some people graduating this month, and art schools are on a slightly different schedule, and there are 3 terms per year. So, depending upon if you've skipped terms, you can sometimes graduate a bit early. I'm going to talk about that and what I think about that way of scheduling your education. But the question here that I'm posing is, are art schools a scam? And the answer is some of them are, absolutely. And I guess what it boils down to is if you're seeking a career as an illustrator in comic books, and you look at the people who have had the greatest success as illustrators in comic books, not a lot of them have college degrees. Now, you're going to look behind me here and you're going to see almost all of the pieces you can see in the background here were created by people with college degrees. And I think everybody has at least some college education. And there's a majority reason for that, most of which is that all of the pieces in back of me were created by artists that I worked with when I've run art galleries. As a gallery owner and a gallery director, I found that it's easiest to work with artists who have some kind of art school background. And that's because you face critique constantly when you're in art school. And so that gives you a thick skin that makes you easier to work with. You get used to hitting deadlines. You get used to delivering things in a way that somebody else wants you to deliver them, not the way that you want them to be delivered. And so that just makes things a lot easier on people who are going to employ you to to do an art task for you. When working with self-taught individuals, sometimes there's an element of pushback, um, because they're not used to criticism. They're not used to having to deliver necessarily on a schedule. Now, of course, if you're talking about someone who is self-taught, who is in the middle of their career, then they're going to have a lot of experience in delivering artwork, in handling contracts and handling clients, and that's going to level the playing field to a great degree. In the comics medium, it's really all about taking direction, doing a good job, having technique, being reliable. Being good is a bonus. There's certainly a lot of people that aren't very good that illustrate comics. Um, I always go back to the old tenet that Neil Gaiman talked about in an address that he gave to graduating college class, where he talked about you need 3 things to succeed. If you are a nice person or easy to get along with, if you are very talented, and if you always deliver on time, you will always work, but you really only need to be any 2 of those 3 things to have long-term success. So I stand by that. That's definitely um, a sequence of criteria that has served me well as a curator in looking for people to exhibit. And popularity doesn't really play a part into it. I think that every client, whether it's a gallerist, whether it's a publisher, whether it's a film company, whoever, magazine, they know what their clientele is already. They know what they're looking for. So if you deliver to them, if you submit and your work isn't a good fit for them, that doesn't mean your work is terrible. It just means that it isn't a good fit for them. And so you have to be tenacious. You have to constantly be, out there and submitting to try and find that client that's going to be able to take your work to the next level, that's going to be able to benefit from it. Now, before we dive too heavily into the question at hand, I want to talk about something that I've noticed in how people are approaching getting work, because you can do that while you're in college. Certainly, you can work on paying the bills while you're learning things if you're at a school that actually teaches you something, and if you're at a school that teaches you in a way that allows you to learn, and that's a very different concept too. But again, before we get there, what I wanted to address is that I'm in a lot of groups on Facebook where they're trying to connect writers with artists, sometimes inkers or colorists or letterers, with other artists or other writers. And I'll see people post something like, "Hey, I'm looking for work as an illustrator," and they don't even post an example of their work. Or if they do post an example, they post, a single illustration drawing. If you're looking for work, as most of these groups are concerned with sequential work, comic books, then you should be posting examples of your ability to tell a sequential story, not just a splash page, not just a cover. If that's what you want to do, if you just want to do covers, then certainly put that in your post, available for cover work only, or available for pinups, available for commissions. But if you're trying to find comic book work and there's no example of your ability to actually do comics, then it's not doing you any favors. It's not doing the prospective client any favors. It's going to lead to a lot of unnecessary back and forth. Now, the other thing that I think is a good idea to do, whether you are a writer seeking a illustration collaborator or whether you are an illustrator seeking a writer or a publisher, talk about what your budget is, what you're willing to pay. And if you have a page rate, make known your page rate and just be okay with that. It's going to make things a lot easier. It will certainly cut down on the amount of questions, misunderstandings, etc. moving forward. If you do reach the point where you are able to connect because you've posted examples of your work, page rates, availability, timelines, limitations on how much work you're willing to do, which doesn't have to be in an initial post, but should be discussed at some point. Then you reach that second tier of payment schedule delivery. Are you going to get paid by page that you deliver? Are you going to get paid by project? Whatever you're going to agree on, I would work into deadlines, specific deadlines, and understand that as an artist, once you sign that contract and there's a deadline on it, you have to hit it. Whatever comes up in your life, whether it be your computer crashes or your dog died or whatever it is, some of these things very serious to you, understand you are still responsible for fulfilling that contract that is signed. I would never embark on any kind of work without a signed contract signed by both parties, that outline what your responsibilities are to the client and what outline the client's responsibilities for you, including payment schedules. Absolutely, make sure all of that is completely outlined before you move forward into actually doing the work. I think that if you are a writer who is pitching for an artist to work on your story, then you want to be as forthcoming as possible without giving plot details. And that should be wherever you've been published, if you've been published, what you're going to pay for someone to work on this for you, page rates, whatever, or overall budget for the amount of pages, and then you can kind of work on, is your penciler going to ink? Do you want your penciler to ink? Do you want to have someone else ink it? You're probably going to want to have someone else letter it. You want to have someone who is adept and good at lettering to do that. That's not always going to be your illustrator. So again, you want to be as clear, so to avoid as many misunderstandings as possible upfront about what it is you have to offer and why anybody would want to work with you. It's also good if you have a complete manuscript. Don't approach somebody when you have an idea for a project. Approach when you have the full project, when it's completely written, when it's done. Then you can hand it off. And then if you want to collaborate because you feel they bring something to it, then you can absolutely do that. If you don't want them bringing anything to it, then be very upfront about that as well. If you have an idea about what your panel layout is going to be, provide that to the illustrator before they start working on it. So, with that out of the way, I think we can now kind of address the big question at hand. Are art schools a scam? Well, fine artists generally need to have some kind of art degree. If they're going into fine art, which means gallery exhibition and you know, finding some kind of notoriety down the line as a auction artist, museum exhibited artist, as you're building up your credentials, one of the things you're going to start with having no credentials or very few credentials and very few exhibitions is going to be your schooling and your degree. And so that goes on your CV, your curriculum vitae, which should be available on your website that tells of your education, where you've been published, and you should keep that updated. Because if you fall behind on that, getting back in to actually start putting that together is a very daunting task. It involves a lot more writing than you think, and you want to make it available so that people can either look at the most important stuff and then have some kind of link where they can see the whole thing. That just shows that you're a responsible person who isn't going to burn them if they hire you for a commission or for some kind of project. In the fine art world, that you want that to be very available. There should be an about on your website, that talks about your biography and then has a very easy to access list of where you've exhibited with your education, any awards or any of that type of thing that should have meaning to a gallerist, because a lot of galleries do want to know if you have a proper formal education, for the same reason that I had stated before, that if you've been through art school, then there's going to be an assumption on behalf of a gallerist or curator that you have a thick skin, that you're capable of meeting deadlines, that you can take criticism and direction. So that's going to be an important element of the about you on your own website. So what if you're not a college graduate, or you don't have any college degrees? Then that curriculum vitae is going to have all of the exhibitions that you've been a part of, whether they are pop-ups that you and your friends have organized, or whether they are municipal gallery juried shows, local uh, public art participation type events, whatever it is. Make sure you have a list of it. Make sure that you have listed as much as you can that showcases, again, that you are a working professional, that people, at least some people, know who you are, and that this is something that you're dedicated to with regular dates, regular exhibitions. This is going to be important as you build out your career in getting better gallery spots, in getting into group shows at more well-known institutions, at getting a shot at getting work into museum exhibitions or municipal shows, and then into important collections. So be aware that that's something that you should be keeping track of and you should be updating on a regular basis. Now, if your aim is to go to art school to learn how to draw, don't do that. Art schools generally don't teach you how to draw or really teach you how to paint or teach you anything beyond taking your skill set and advancing it towards a degree, which means that they're going to teach you to pass their class. And after you've had a number of instructors and professors who have taught you how to pass their class, you will graduate and you will get a degree that tells the world that you graduated from this school that taught you how to graduate from their school. There's no guarantee that you will get work as a result of that degree. There is no guarantee that you will be able to have employment that will even allow you to pay back what that education has cost you. So understand what it is that you want when you go to art school. I think this is something that high school kids in general don't have enough of a discussion with their parents before they go directly after a summer off from 12th grade into college. I think that there's an idea that a college education is useful that goes back to the 1970s and prior, that I don't think is as true today as it was. Certainly, when you look on job applications and companies are looking for people with master's degrees and paying the minimum wage, you got to understand that it's a way for them to be able to filter out this or that, that they want the most capable people. But honestly, they're going to want whoever can perform the task. And if you have actual experience working in the field, which you could have gotten in the 3 or 4 years that it took this this person with a diploma to graduate, then you may actually be in a better position 4 years in than that person who is just entering the workplace now after 3 or 4 years in college. And I say 3 or 4 years in college because while the standard bachelor's degree is a 4-year program, in art schools, very frequently they're 3 years with 3 terms instead of 2 terms per year. So instead of there being a semester, there's trimesters, and it allows them to, first of all, it's way less time off. So you go really from one term directly into the next term, almost with no amount of time to be able to digest what it is that you've just learned about in order to be able to implement it into your art practice. And so I've always suggested to people that are going to art schools that have these 3 terms per year to take a term off every 2 terms, if you can, to give yourself a chance to digest. Now, there is absolutely a chance that the tuition could go up the next term, but honestly, it doesn't go up so much that it's going to make a difference, that that time off won't have supplied you with information to make intelligent decisions. So, and again, you also want to make sure that you're able to get the classes that you're going to college to take. If you chose a specific college because a specific professor is teaching there, then understand that your schedule and how everything works out should revolve around exactly that. And then whether you graduate or not, as long as you got what you wanted out of that class, which is the class that brought you via that professor to that college, then you will have at least accomplished that. Um, a lot of art schools, and especially, and we're not really talking about people that are going to school to illustrate, but people who are going in animation or some kind of film production, most students in these schools do not graduate with diplomas because they get hired in their sophomore and junior years and get offered enough money that graduation is no longer important, that diploma is way less important if you now already have a career in that field. And so what do you get with a diploma? With a diploma, you get the ability in some circumstances to go into academia and teach, um, whether right out the gate or after a career, to be able to do so. Honestly, if you leave college early and don't graduate, as most people who have ever attended CalArts have done, and you get hired by Disney or Pixar, as most of the people who have dropped out of CalArts have done, and you get a career that's offering you enough money to pay off your student loans within a year, that's probably a good opportunity. If you stay in the industry and you build up a reputation, that's not going to stop you from teaching in academia in 20 or 30 years. And honestly, you may be able to get an honorary degree from a lesser college that will want to be associated with you because of the value of your career and experience. In a way, and I'll be absolutely honest about this, going to sound incredibly egotistical. One of the reasons why I never went back to finish college was because I've done so much work with a couple of rather important art schools that I sort of feel like I deserve an honorary degree. It's ridiculous. And I actually don't really expect that, but it would be nice. And I don't even expect that honorary degree from the colleges that I've done the work with, but I have been invited into MFA programs at other schools as a result of what I've done as an art curator, as the director of certain galleries, as a publisher, and working with instructors who were in those programs at these schools that wanted to work with me at some point. So just me, I'm not fabulously famous. I'm not, while I'm respected in the art business, I'm not extremely well known, but among people who know people like me, I guess I am. So that's not something you should count on, but I do have incredible respect for degrees, for their value in being a quick access to be able to teach in academic circumstances. Now, I've also curated a number of shows at museums in the United States and abroad, and sometimes that can become an issue. Not having a degree can be an issue in dealing with independent curators at these museums, not the board of directors, not the people who actually get you these gigs, but the people that you kind of have to work with, because and I understand why they do it. They have a process of how they need things to be received, and you have to work within that structure at every institution, whether it's a college gallery or a museum or a city-owned municipal art fund. Regardless, they have a way that they do things, and so they have people in place that can be your liaison. And sometimes those people can have a chip on their shoulder because they feel like they have a degree and you don't have a degree, and they feel a certain way about that, regardless of whether or not they have actual real world experience or they don't, or whether they have experience outside of academia or outside of institutional exhibition. So I've had good experiences, I've had bad experiences in a couple of cases, and I've got several friends who, like me, were building up resumes over decades of running art galleries and institutions, in the commercial world. And you come across somebody who's in academia, who has an MFA, who might even have a doctorate in art history or something like that, and they feel a certain way that, how come I have to work with this person that doesn't have an education? And then they realize, that after a time that your experience is valuable in a proportionate way to why their education is valuable. And generally, you can get through these things. I have had to walk away occasionally from museum curations. And then in two cases where I had to walk away because I felt I was being disrespected by a on the payroll curator for an institution, the board of directors came back to me and said, "You don't need to work with them. We brought this show in because we wanted to bring you in. We're sorry that there was a misunderstanding," that type of thing. I've seen that happen with quite a few other people who were like me, that were gallerists, and came up against the kind of institutional backlash. So if you're afraid that that's your career path, then I can understand. And I would easily say that, yes, a college degree is going to be necessary in sort of walking that path, in keeping harmony and getting more regular gigs of that variety. Now, most people who don't have degrees, who would be in my position, have their own galleries. And so if you have your own gallery, you have your own gig. These side gigs are generally, they don't pay as well as running your own gallery does. They involve a whole bunch of things that you don't have to deal with when you are running your own show. And I mean, even if you can work and play well with others, and I think I can, there are benefits to not having to, and just being able to make an executive decision about what to put here, where to put it, where to hang things, how to light things. I've, in several occasions, walked into a museum where I had guest curated a show, and that evening asked them to break out the scaffolding so that we could relight the entire show because it was not lit correctly. That's at a museum. So, coming from gallery life, where you have to light shows all the time and pieces are in different places all the time, it's it's easier to understand that that's a part of the process. But as an illustrator, again, if your thing is you want to draw comics, then you should just be drawing comics, and you should probably self-publish. And if you want to expand your fan base and your recognition beyond just being someone who produces your own comic, then by all means submit your work to Marvel or DC or Image or whoever. Image, generally speaking, it's self-publishing with a bigger publisher. But with Marvel or DC, or even maybe Dark Horse or somebody like that, where it is possible that you could be hired to illustrate somebody else's intellectual property, understand it doesn't pay well, and that there is a lot of editorial. There's a certain expectation. There may be a style guide that you have to follow. All of these things. You can't change things too much. But if you get popular among the readership of somebody else's intellectual property, of a well-known character, be it Marvel, DC, or whoever, then that fan base may follow you back to your own series. And I think the best way to time that is if you have your own series and you know what the publishing schedule is for the book that you're going to work on is, then you want to the best degree possible, get those in comic shops at the same time so that your project can benefit from this other project. If you are kickstarting something or you have some kind of other crowdsourced publishing schedule, then be able to take advantage of working on that more well-known character to put back into the description of your project, again, so that people understand that you deliver, that you can meet deadlines, that if they invest in your GoFundMe or Kickstarter or whatever, that they're going to get something for it, that they're not going to get burned, that they're not going to have to wait 4, 5, 6 years for something to come about. And so again, that's that provable experience is the benefit. The same way that, a degree can be that quote unquote provable experience for someone who hasn't really embarked deeply onto their career yet. Now, as you looking back at me, you're going to see artists from Art Center, School of Visual Arts, Loyola Marymount, Cal Arts, Tuscany, SciArc, and Pratt. And so I think there's only 2 people on that wall in back of me who are self-taught, and both of them took private instruction. So that's another interesting part of the pie. So if you want to draw comics, there are specialty art schools that teach you how to do just that. And the instructors and the schools themselves have really good relationships with publishers. That's a benefit. So if you're going to go to a specialty school like the Joe Kubert School, then your instructors are people who are working professionals who are going to help you tighten up either your chops or your panel design or something. You're going to get a benefit that's going to be directly funnelable back into the art that you are pursuing. And I have seen at other schools, and I'll call one out, that years ago, Otis in Los Angeles, basically near the beach towns on the west side of town, very respected art school. In the early or the late aughts, amazing group of instructors, including Bob Daub and Nathan Oda, who had actually been Bob's teacher at a certain point, and the amazing students coming out of those years. The illustration chair left, and there was a promotion, and the person that wound up taking the illustration chair was someone who had never worked professionally. They had gone to Otis, graduated from Otis, gotten their advanced degrees from Otis, then hired as faculty, and then given the illustration chair. And I remember having a conversation with them in the first couple of weeks of them taking over that position. And I heard this person say to someone else, "We don't teach people how to draw, we teach them how to think." And I actually said out loud, and I said, well, that's interesting, because I thought that teaching people how to think was philosophy, which is probably the only degree worth less than an art degree. And my boss at the time actually almost choked because he was laughing. The chair did kind of one of these like, and didn't really comment on it. Shortly thereafter, a lot of instructors left Otis, stopped teaching there. Around that time, Nathan Oda started teaching at Santa Monica City College. Now, can you imagine, instead of paying art school prices for an education on how to illustrate painting foundation, being able to pay city college class fees and get an instructor like Nathan Oda? Well, the truth is, in Los Angeles and in New York City, you can kind of do that all the time. So many of these teachers take side gigs. And so you can get private instruction rather than pay for an entire curriculum. You can get specialized instruction. So if you wanted to learn, you know, foundational painting, I mean, you can go to a place like Nomon in Los Angeles and get incredible instruction in a small class over the course of several weeks, which would be the equivalent of, you know, an advanced class at Art Center or Otis or even Art Institute, and for a fraction of what a college education is going to cost you. Now, you're not going to get a diploma, but you're actually going to learn what you want to learn. You won't have to kind of like sit through instruction that you don't gain anything from. So bear that in mind too. There are a lot of the people too, like I say on this wall in back of me, in addition to their college degrees and the education that they got at art school, took private instruction, sometimes from really, really talented people. Now, there's also some people in that wall that don't paint anymore, that they just didn't pursue the arts after graduating, after getting their degrees, after, you know, trying to work in the arts in some capacity, shifted gears and went into completely different areas of study because the art business wasn't paying their bills, was not recouping on what the cost of their education was, and had embittered them against wanting to do it when they used to love it. So understand that's a possibility, that when you turn a love or a hobby into a career, it can be unpleasant. But that's about all I have to say on that. Please, as I said, like, comment below. I'll look at those and I'll try and address it later. Thank you.